Hello. Today I have with me Larry Alex Taunton, a fearless US journalist who has made headlines in alternative media, but also in major media. I've seen the Wikipedia entry, which is, of course, a kind of frame, but still quite impressive. Larry, you've been covered by, your work has been covered by the BBC, by the New York Times. You've had articles in numerous major publications, but you've chosen the path of, let's say, truly investigative reporting. And so now you're actually fighting the corrupt system. And I'm very happy to have you here. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you, Max. It's a pleasure for me to be with you from Rome.
Wonderful. I came across your work through a recent story that popped up on X, where you entered the USAid compound of the US Embassy in Cairo. And as we probably recall, there was a Doge, Elon Musk's Doge, found out that there's quite some misuse. I mean, a tremendous misuse of money, like 2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism. This is right from a White House press release. 47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, and so on and so on and so forth and so forth. So it's tremendous waste at USAid, but the story behind is deeper. So what about this story in Cairo?
Well, Max, as you have pointed out as we were chatting before we began the interview, my work has really been focusing on globalization, particularly with, say, those who would gather every year in Davos at the World Economic Forum. And what intrigues me most of all, Max, is I'm interested in the realm of ideas. My work has always been focused on the ideas and then how those ideas impact and change the culture. I mean, my own podcast is called Ideas Have Consequences. So I go to places like the World Economic Forum to see where the ideas themselves are chambered, as it were, and then I go downrange from that to see how they impact the lives of millions. And why that interests me, Max, is because what we are seeing with a lot of EU leaders, the kinds of people who would gather at the World Economic Forum, is that they have insulated themselves from the ideas that they would make the rest of us, adhere to. And kind of just a small example of this, Ursula von der Leyen, she shows up at the World Economic Forum in an Audi A8, not the American version, which is much tamer, but the European version, which is a 12-cylinder, 585 horsepower 11-mile to the gallon vehicle. And I just want to be clear, Max, I would love to own one, but I wouldn't show up at the World Economic Forum and then begin to pontificate how everyone else needed to watch their carbon footprint. And these people don't even see this, Max. It's hypocritical. They see themselves as the exception to those rules. And so as it applies to USAID, the World Economic Forum has really pushed for open borders. And so I've been tracking all across South America, through Central America, all the way up to Mexico City, migrant caravans that are coming from all over the world,
Mhm.
mostly from South America, where they board La Bestia, the beast, or sometimes called the train of death, a freight train. They get on top of it and take it 600 miles north to U.S. borders. So in the process of doing that, I began going down the USAID rabbit hole because I began noticing in cartel towns in Darien, the most dangerous, arguably the most dangerous jungle in the world.
And just a question, you have been doing this for many years, so before Elon Musk started his investigation.
That's right. For about 6 years, I've probably made 12 to 15 trips to South America in that period of time, all over, following these migrant caravans. And it was because I was trying to answer the question, Max. There was a lot of focus in my own country on the border, but no one seemed to be asking, well, what's going on the other side of the border? What is causing
Right.
millions of people, to make a run on our own border? What I began seeing there, Max, was these people are so arrogant. USAID had their own signage, their own logos all over the place, where they were taking the public, in US media, they were taking the public position that they were trying to stem the tide of mass migration, but in reality, they were running what amounted to a massive human trafficking op. Well, it was from there, from South America, Max, that I went to the World Economic Forum again. And from there, I went to Cairo. And I thought, while I'm in Cairo, and as you know, things got a little dicey there.
Yes.
I was actually there for a completely different reason. But I thought, I could see on Google Earth that there was a massive USAID military type compound in Cairo. And I thought, I'm going to go over there and just ask them, because by this time, this is only maybe 10 days ago.
Right.
By this time, the president of the United States had issued his executive order asking, or not asking, demanding USAID, cease operations. So I went over there, I went through their security, and here I am standing.
Pushed your way through it with confidence and so on. So you got through three barriers, and then you were stopped at the fourth guard, right? That was
exactly.
You just walked in.
I just walked in, and so there was no, grappling hooks, no Tom Cruise rappelling down from a ventilation shaft, nothing like that. I went right past their security, spoke to their security. They waved me through. I come into the building, and then I ask, which seemed to send them all sideways, what do you guys do here? And are you complying with the President of the United States order to shut down? Max, that sent them completely sideways. I had a feeling they were going to try to detain me. So I left quite rapidly. And then a week later, I came back. I know, silly me, but a week later, I decided to come back.
But you didn't even want to enter. You just drove by, basically.
Just going to drive by. I'm just driving by. I'm in a different vehicle. So, but the USAID security guards, who, to be clear, have no jurisdiction outside of the compound. They're paid by, my tax dollars, American taxpayer dollars. They came out from beyond the boom gate, stopped the car, and before long, I found myself in a 2.5-hour standoff with Egyptian state security, the NSA, which is not to be confused with the American NSA. They're the Egyptian equivalent to the KGB.
And they were trained by the KGB, as you remarked in your posts. I mean, Egypt was for a long time a Soviet ally. So, yes.
Absolutely astonishing. And they were trying to get me out of the vehicle, not by force. They kept asking me to get out of the vehicle. I refused politely. They demanded my phone. I refused to give it to them. And they demanded my passport. And I held the passport, although they knew already who I was, which was interesting.
Because, I mean, you have quite a profile in the internet, so you're not a terrorist. I mean, but now you have in your nickname, you call yourself Larry Terrorist Taunton, maybe because of this incident. But
yeah, because of this incident, because they were accusing me of terrorism, which is, of course, ridiculous. So I held my passport inside the vehicle so that they could see it. I told them, you cannot have it. And for those who might not know, this is not my first rodeo. I'm traveling, in the third world frequently. You never surrender your passport to anybody you don't trust. That's a preliminary step to arrest. Once they have it, you cannot leave the country. And your phone, in this case, it was proof that I existed. It was my contact with the outside. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't going to give, and I hadn't yet been formally charged with anything, but they were suggesting that I was some kind of terrorist. So I held up, my passport, let them take a picture of it. And in the meantime, I was kind of surreptitiously taking videos and firing them off to various people in the United States who swing a pretty big stick on social media, so that if I disappeared and there were inquiries made of the Egyptian government and they say, well, he must have fallen in the Nile, then they could say, well, no, we know exactly where he was when he disappeared. So this was very, very intense. I think they intended to Jamal Khashoggi me.
You said you had a few layers of protection, one of them being a US citizen, but you didn't trust that protection too much. This also concerns me, but I thought that would give you pretty good protection in that country. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I think if I had been, say, an Egyptian or Somali or Nigerian, they wouldn't have cared. They'd have just dragged me out of the car, and that would have been that, and I'd never been seen or heard from again. The fact that I was a U.S. citizen and it was post January 20, that is to say, post Trump's inauguration. Prior to that, I think they would have known that the Biden administration would back them with whatever they did, where I was concerned. But this is post January 20. So
Hmm.
again, that's only about 10 days ago.
Right.
So I think that created problems for them in not knowing exactly, what to do with me. And so I was trying to force the issue by not getting out of the car because I felt like I only have a couple of choices, a couple of options here. And one is that I'm not going to cooperate. I'm going to be friendly. I'm not going to be aggressive, but I'm not going to cooperate and give them any, my devices or, my passport, and I'm not getting out of the vehicle. And if they charge me with terrorism, that's going to look ridiculous because, as I said in the article, it's not been since Stonewall Jackson, the Presbyterians were blowing things up. And so they dropped that and they went in the direction of espionage, which I thought was even more ridiculous because, one of the NSA men said to me, "Do you have an Egyptian government permit to take pictures of Egyptian government buildings?" And I said, "No." And he looked thrilled. And I said, "But that is a U.S. government building and I'm a U.S. citizen. How is what dog in the fight does Egypt have in preventing me from taking a picture of my own government building?" And also it creates problems for the Max because it would be a tacit admission that USAID, that what was on the other side of those walls was more than, say, pallets of rice and grain and canned goods. I mean, what would one expect to find at USAID that they did not want me to see? And I think that was causing real problems for them too. So they kept huddling up around the vehicle as yet no weapons had been drawn, but it was tense and it felt like it could go sideways at any moment.
And you sat in the car for almost 3 hours, right?
Yeah, it was about 2.5 hours. It's funny. It's funny how these things go, because afterwards, when I was talking to my wife about it, I was, I'm starting to write this article for the Federalist, which
Hmm.
which you have kindly read. Um, I was saying, do you remember how long this was? Was it about an hour? And she says, no. She knew because she knew when I had texted her and at the beginning and at the end.
Hmm.
And she said it was about 3 hours. And I thought, holy smokes, because in the middle of something like that,
Yes.
as intense as that,
Yes.
you lose all sense of time.
Yes. So they were very secretive. They did things they shouldn't have done. It was a real danger. And you didn't have the impression USAID was shutting down then and there.
Not at all. And listen, what's particularly stupid about this, Max, is if you're a smart villain, let's just say that you are Ernst Stavro Blofeld and you're the villain who's sitting inside the USAID compound calling the shots, and it was someone inside
Yeah,
who
of
was
course.
calling the shots. A, an obvious response to this would have been to say, yeah, well, tell him that, yeah, we are complying with the president's orders, just a process of a slow wind down, and there's no story.
Right.
But the result of this, their response, their desire to clearly do me harm, was the Streisand effect. I mean, this has gotten the attention of the highest levels of our government who are watching these videos and
Donald Trump has praised your work, right?
saying, yeah, yes, he has, very, very kindly, and asking what in the world is going on, and meaning members of our own government are asking what is going on at USAID Cairo.
Wonderful. I mean, it takes a lot of courage, and I mean, it's probably not the first stunt like this you've been pulling off. So we thank you for that. I mean, we need brave journalists like you. I mean, as you know, the mainstream media is quite it's a fake propaganda whatsoever. So you've been on many issues, and this is just your latest coup, so to say. I've seen you on your X account at the premiere of 2000 Mules, the documentary about the election fraud and so on. We couldn't say that on YouTube at the time. Maybe you can say it now. We'll see. So you've had an interesting theory about the Epstein list because a few days ago, um, supposedly the Epstein list was to be published, and then it was all known material and no names. And I said, well, maybe a certain lobby is so strong that the administration cannot do it after all. Um, I've also seen the videos of Brett Weinstein with this, where he talks about his meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. So it's clearly that Jeffrey Epstein was a facade, he was a front for something. But you have I mean, you just mentioned it in one or two sentences, but I thought this is at least a hypothesis, a theory worth considering. So what is your theory about the Epstein list and the publication?
Well, my own theory is simply this, and again, as you point out, it is a theory, and I could be utterly mistaken, but I have been very um, dubious of the idea that there's some kind of list that sits around that will incriminate high level Democrats, Democrat donors, globalists, you name it. I just find it very hard to believe that Bill Gates, who's worth hundreds of billions of dollars, is doesn't have the means of getting his own name off of a list, or Bill Clinton, or whoever it might be. So I have felt like from the beginning that if such a list ever existed, it existed in order to get leverage over these people. And once Democrats saw that they weren't going to remain in power, a list like that, again, if it ever existed, would disappear, and it would either be shredded or taken out the back door or something to that effect. But I just don't believe that there's any list like that that's sitting around waiting, you
Mhm.
know, for Pam Bondi or Cash Patel or somebody to walk in and go, oh, there it is, the list, with all of the information on it. I just think Democrats are a little smarter than that.
Yes, I can see that. So we'll see how that evolves and develops. Um, we'll certainly get some more news later on. You also made a comment about the famous or infamous Trump-Zelensky meeting, a long post on X, where you explained your theory about this. So you thought that Trump clearly expected to sign a deal.
Yeah, I think so. And that was mentioned. If you listen to a lot of the commentary from people on X, and I think even in our media, haven't bothered to watch the full, 50-minute press conference. And that's key to understanding what took place. It's obvious from the things that Trump said that he understood this to be kind of a meet and greet. This is just a opportunity to shake hands and express good feelings in front of the media prior to signing, as Trump himself says. We're going to be signing, I think he says over lunch, but afterwards, we're going to be signing this, mineral rights agreement. And if you didn't know that, if you weren't paying attention to that, and all you saw was just the clip of the two of them, talking over each other, well, then, you could be led to believe almost anything. But when you watch the entire thing, what's clear is that that was the purpose of the meeting. And Zelensky has decided to come in, A, with no intention of signing, and B, to try to renegotiate the deal before the media.
In front
And
of the
it's
public.
Vance. That's right. And you can see that Vance is starting to get really irritated because he is recognizing what's happening here, and he's thinking, you get the impression that he's thinking, what in the world? We invited you to sign this agreement, and
Mhm.
now you are using this as a courtroom to push out something entirely different. And so he's the one who calls Zelensky on the carpet for that. And the media want to portray it as though Vance was he was the aggressor.
They do
But
portray
he
it
didn't
like this.
know.
I mean,
What's that?
unanimously, they do portray it like this. I mean,
100%.
mm,
And if you didn't know that Zelensky had hijacked the meeting, had hijacked the press conference to use it for an entirely different purpose, you wouldn't know why Vance is upset. And
mhm.
so he's decided to come after him and say, look, you've abused this forum. You have disrespected the President of the United States and the White House by showing up here and doing this. And that's exactly what he had done. I mean, it was a classless move on his part. And yet, Trump, you got to give him credit. Trump, as he even says in this press conference, he sees himself as a deal maker. And he even tries to bring a little peace between Vance and Zelensky and sort of like, calm down, boys. We can salvage this thing. It's going to be fine. And then Zelensky decides to come after Trump. And where I thought that Zelensky terribly overplayed his very weak hand was he begins talking over the president. And he's not listening to the president at all. And he just keeps going and going and going. And I thought it was incredibly rude. But, Max, I'm sure you've been in plenty of negotiations. I certainly have, where I had the strong hand and some where I've had the weak hand. And you hope that when you have the strong hand, you're gracious. And when you have the weak hand, you have to be shrewd. You have to be wise. And you certainly don't insult the people that you depend upon
right.
to save your country. And I thought that Zelensky, and he has since, we've now seen all the things that he said and keeps saying post press conference that show him not just to be a small, petty, individual, but it shows him to be extremely foolish. He walked into the White House. I'm thinking of, perhaps you'll know exactly what I'm referencing, but I'm thinking of Prince Metternich at the Congress of Vienna, 1814, 1815. He had a fairly weak hand to play, but he was genius in the manner of the way he went about playing it.
Yes.
And I think of de Gaulle, post World War II, the weakest hand of any power. But de Gaulle the Americans hate him, but I have to say this: for the French love him, and they do for a reason. He was very jealous of French prerogative, and he managed to secure a future for his country.
Mm-hmm.
And Zelensky would have done well to know, and I'm sure he knows nothing about either one of those, but he would have done well to know something of those historical events, because he did exactly the opposite. He has insulted not just President Trump and Vice President Vance. He's insulted the American people, who are enraged over his behavior.
He's gambling ever higher. It looks like some German Austrian some while ago who's putting the stakes ever higher. So, I mean, we won't say more here. But this minerals deal, I mean, I think we both are happy that President Trump is in office. But what's your take on the minerals deal? I mean, as a German and an American, I can only view this with dismay to some extent, I must say.
Yeah, and Trump addressed that in the press conference as well. And there's no reasonable person who could disagree with what Trump said. He said, "Look, the money that was given to Ukraine by the EU," he says, they have security for that. They've given it to you in terms of loans. He says, but the American taxpayer has no such security. Now, we recognize that we've given you $350 billion. We recognize you don't have that in hard currency. That's fine. We will take it in a minerals deal, and you'll benefit from it, and we'll benefit from it. And that, again, is Trump's strength. He's a deal maker, but he's saying, look, the American taxpayer can't be bled like this. You've got to give something in return. And Zelensky, the impression you get is that he had agreed to this prior to coming to the White House, but then tries to reject it all right in front of the media.
Putting on my German hat, I have a slightly different take on this, of course, because 90+% of the USAid was weapons aid that got recycled to the military-industrial complex. So it benefited the US. It didn't benefit Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine could fight a war that would have stopped in early 22 if Johnson and Biden had wanted to do so. That's the one thing. And also having a deal like this, of course, is more like impoverishing Ukraine. I mean, it wouldn't really. I mean, we had the same thing with Burisma Holdings, where Hunter Biden was a board member and so on. So it's a complex situation. But at
Fair
least there's
point.
the willingness to end the war, and there's no willingness on Zelensky's part, of course, because he would know that the day the war ends is down. I mean, he has a 16%. I mean, the president talked of 4, but numbers are like 16, but that's not very high either. So we'll see how that develops. I have a final point I would like to discuss with you. I've seen that you're a Christian, that you've also arranged and organized a few debates. Actually, I had through I'm an affiliated institute. I had Richard Dawkins there for a debate. So we've had the same people there. I'm a Christian too, and how does that influence your work?
Well, it's an excellent question, Max. It influences it in a very big way. You know, when I was a young man, I kind of flirted with atheism, and I began reading a lot of Friedrich Nietzsche, and
Oh,
it's a kind of odd for a kid, to be reading a lot of Nietzsche, but it did.
well,
And
then we have something in common.
well, I ultimately concluded he was a hypocrite. I thought, here he is telling me there's no meaning in life, but he's found his meaning in going around and telling people there's no meaning in life. And I became a Christian because I met I'll say a muscular Christian, somebody with real theological teeth, and began mentoring me. It was some of the things I began reading and thinking much more deeply on the Christian faith. But that's been a theme for me because of my work. When I really started out on my own, whatever it's been 20 plus years ago, I was really focused on atheism. And then came along, the so-called new atheists with their spate of best-selling books, guys like Dawkins and Hitchens and Dennett and Sam Harris and so on. And so I began arranging, high-level academic debates, Princeton, Oxford, a number of other places, and began debating some of these guys myself and developing relationships with them, and becoming quite good friends with one of them, certainly Christopher Hitchens, the late Christopher Hitchens. And but now the public debate on this issue has sort of moved on a notch, and
Hmm. Right.
then now the modern residence of atheism, I think, finds itself at Davos. I think it finds itself in the kind of policies these people are pushing. And it may be a shock to some who are listening who may think this is some kind of wild conspiracy theory. I assure you it isn't. And you can find them saying it. But I mean, these are people who have very little regard for human beings,
Yes.
talking quite openly about depopulation. And they're pushing that kind of agenda. So every year I go and I sit among them, pretend to be one of them, Max, because I want to kind of understand the way they think. And because they're so bloody arrogant, they never bother asking me who I am or what I do, and they just begin, telling me everything that they believe.
They open up. You
Quite
get in
shocking.
by press accreditation, or you just sneak in. Oh,
I,
is that a
I just
secret?
I just walk straight in the way I did to USAID, and it's actually pretty funny, Max, because for all the World Economic Forum's infatuation with technology, specifically with AI, they're remarkably analog in the way they run their conference. It's usually just young women with clipboards standing at the door checking people off as they come in, and I walk in just very confidently, and almost none of them ever dare question who I might be. I might be some important billionaire,
Yes. And then
so they just leave me alone.
you don't question them. No, no, that's that's wonderful. So this is how your faith, I mean, evolved, and what you did in your work, and then now it gives you strength to carry on and to do what you do, because it's not, it's, I mean, it could be dangerous, really. And you have 4 children, you have a wife, so you have, I mean, some things, you have a family to protect, but your family is okay with that.
Well, I think my wife, she recognizes my calling. She's very supportive of my calling, and she knows I'm built for this. This is a work that I'm built for. And there, I will say this though about USAID, about what happened in Cairo. There are aspects to my work that are dangerous. For instance, going into cartel towns, flying a single prop, into the Darien Gap, those kind of things. Those things are dangerous. Popping over to USAID Cairo, I did not expect to be dangerous. I expected them to just stone. I honestly, I thought I'll be back in a half hour. I'm going to go over there and they're going to say, "Yeah, we're closed today. We're in the process of shutting down. Sorry, no one can give you an interview today." I thought that would be it. And instead, they went nuts at that place and kept escalating it. And they came for me the next day at my hotel, and I'd already left the country, but I wasn't expecting that to be what it became.
Mhm. Well, it certainly created a stir, and we hope it will contribute that USAID is being shut down. I mean, Elon Musk just called it a giant money laundering machine. So thank you for your work, and I very much hope to have you again here, and all best for your work.
Max, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and I hope for the two of us to chat again sometime.
Pleasure's on my side. All best.
Thank you.